Welcome to GynoCurious. I'm your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we're here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please, if you have any questions or concerns, send them to comments at radiofreerhinecliffe.org or to me at gynocurious.com. And if you're interested in my clinical practice, please go to dramynovat.com. So I've been thinking a lot about the perimenopause and menopause. There's been so much conversation these days about this transition in our lives. Oh, on social media, in the news, on the web. And I'm actually thrilled. I'm grateful that there's so much conversation out there about this time in our lives. But I also know that much of what's out there, whether it's about products, supplements, or even medical guidance, can be inaccurate, AI generated, or only part of the picture. And certainly for many folks, it just feels very impersonal. Like, are they talking about me or not? And when you're going through this transition yourself, questions naturally arise. What can I expect? What's normal and what's concerning? How do I sort through all the recommendations out there? And most importantly, who can I trust with my health, safety, and well-being? That's why I'm so excited to have this conversation today. I want to introduce you to two wonderful colleagues with whom I'm co-leading a retreat this November 7th through 9th, at Mama Farm in Bellport, Long Island. Mama Farm, founded by Isabella Rossellini, is a regenerative farm and a truly, truly beautiful setting. It's the perfect backdrop for our third Art of Pausing retreat, a rare blend of medical insight, somatic wisdom, and spiritual grounding. This year, Dr. Laura MacIsaac and I will be again focusing on the perimenopause and menopause, drawing on the latest science and evidence to explore how we can best support health during this transition. We'll cover everything from, bone health, sexual well-being, and brain function to mood changes, and these are just some examples. We'll also look at what's proven, what's emerging, and what remains unknown about treatment options, always with an eye towards safety, efficacy, and alternatives. In this intimate, small group setting, we'll have the chance to have an honest conversation about this transition, as well as build community. And this year, we're so thrilled to be joined by Padma, an ordained Buddhist and mindfulness teacher, who will share her wisdom on weaving contemplative practices into healthcare. Together, we hope to offer a holistic, grounding experience for anyone anticipating or navigating this stage in their life. Welcome, Padma and Laura. How are you both?
Good morning, Amy. I'm well, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Great. So, Padma, why don't we start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself so that the listeners can know more about you.
Yeah, so I'm going to stay with what I think is probably most relevant here. So as you mentioned, I've been ordained and teaching in Buddhist contexts for more than 20 years, where I lead study, I lead retreats. And then about 10 years ago, I decided this was a change of career for me from philanthropy to training as a chaplain. So I did clinical education as a chaplain, which is pretty intensive. It's a couple of years of training in a hospital in Pennsylvania. And then I stayed on to teach, mainly to teach mindfulness and more recently working with staff and staff well-being. But in that context, I've worked a lot with patient groups, teaching mindfulness courses and supporting them in that way in kind of integrative healthcare. That's really kind of what I'm interested in. So I kind of bring a blend. I'm also a professional certified coach. So I bring a sort of blend of different skills. And I would say, at a deep level, my focus comes through from this kind of Buddhist practice, really trying to support people in being kinder to themselves. And group, I love group contact. So I lead group retreats, and in the mindfulness courses, it's bringing people together who in a way often share a common you could say disease profile. So I've led courses for people with cancer, people with Parkinson's, Huntington's, and really even just that group container where they can connect with each other around a common issue can be so beautiful. So that, in a way, I think that's the most relevant thing about me.
Great. Well, I think that's why Laura and I are so
Yeah.
excited to have you. Laura, can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Sure. I'm Dr. Laura MacIsaac, and I have been an OB-GYN for nearly 30 years. And I've spent most of my time in academic medicine, all in New York City, with a short chapter in San Francisco for a fellowship training in reproductive health research. And over the arc of that career, my focus has mostly been on reproductive health for both younger, from the beginning of the period through menopause. I did obstetrics for about half my career, but then really wanted to focus in on gynecology. And then more recently in the midlife and menopausal focus. And I think being around trainees, medical students, residents, fellows, all those young people as they are moving up this incredibly steep hierarchy of medicine in this very intense environment of medical training has sort of been this whole other layer of from being the clinician to my patients, but also sort of being a mentor, a life coach, like a made up sort of self-certified mentor to these young people. And in my field, mostly women go into obstetrics and gynecology today, all the way through their, having their children and then facing all of the challenges of being a doctor and serving oneself as well, relationships to family, to partners, to aging parents, to their children. And so that space has now been sort of nurtured and nourished into this wanting to do much more personalized coaching around difficult transitions in life. So then I found Dr. Amy and about a decade ago, and we thought about all these creative ways that we could serve our patients in a more holistic and much more immersive way to not just discuss our healthcare needs and vulnerabilities and fears, but also like unpack them at a much deeper level, not just talk about the science and the information and make recommendations, but kind of like, what does it all mean to you to feel this way, to have these stages, to go through these transitions and help them navigate kind of a roadmap forward.
Yeah.
So that's like from beginning to where we are today, and why our menopause retreats have been so unbelievably fulfilling.
So there are a couple of things I want to touch on. One, this concept of being in a group, being in community. And I know that Laura and I, now that this is our third retreat at Mama Farm, when we reflect on the two prior events, one of the things that was just so enriching and wonderful about them was the community that was built kind of from the moment people entered the farm on Friday night. And it's something that happens pretty quickly with a group of women, particularly in a small group. And I guess I'd like, Laura, you to reflect on that as well. And Padma, after Laura, just comment on the group dynamic and why that is so powerful for us individually, kind of both emotionally and spiritually, perhaps.
Hmm. Yes, I think Amy and I and particularly with each one, this happens more so, but almost immediately, I think the participants who, are sort of brave enough to say, I want to do this and talk about these very intimate parts of my life with these two doctors I don't know and this mindfulness person I don't know, and then other participants. So they kind of walk in, there's a act of courage to get there, but then there's the you can just see the kind of melting of defenses really, and this opening up quickly to the kind of an energy of we're all having similar experiences of being in a society that's really dogmatic, and we're trying to navigate very individual and peaceful and, hopefully some joyful ways in our life, but we're drowning. And the sort of, melting of defenses and opening up to a shared experience just happened a lot more quickly than we had planned all these things to help facilitate getting to that energy. And it happened really within the first few hours, and then a lot of laughter, sometimes some tears, and people saying, I've never said this out loud. So we all felt really honored to be kind of in this. It really became quite sacred. The farm has a very strong female energy, I think, because it's the name. It's Isabella Rossellini and her daughter are kind of you feel them everywhere. So there is I think that the physical space really lends itself also. And then just, a lot of trust came right away.
Yeah,
Mm.
great. Thank you.
Mm.
Emma, what is it about these group dynamics that just bring spirit and soul often so quickly to the space?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things from working at the hospital that I have really had to do in a way, because it's a teaching hospital and I work a lot with residents and staff, is to learn about, what is there any science to this? And interestingly, I think there really is a science to this. There's a science to how group dynamic creates a different kind of energetic container. Just sort of the energies of opening. I mean, you mentioned like people will immediately start talking about things that they may never have shared. The fact that you can have, like in a mindfulness course, for example, there are education components, but really most of the magic is the sharing around that. So, people just reflecting back with each other. And then, of course, I work in spiritual context, so I'm also just very interested, as a Buddhist as well, in energies. And there is no question for me that there's a whole energy that's happening in group containers. So, being, and one of the things that we're going to be doing on this weekend is creating a sort of ritual space, as it were, a space that's a little bit separate from the education piece, where people can just be with each other, and some of that is just helping people to align and attune with like the body and what's the end. Even right now, we can sense that the body has its own energy, and there's a way that the three of us are connecting in that way, as well as through words and understanding. So it's just really the you could say the science of that, or the magic of that something happens. And I want to say that I do a lot of retreats. I'd say more of the retreats I do are just with women, and I think there is just something about, we know that we do better when our bodies feel kind of safe. And there's something about, especially in this area, feeling a space where there can be a container that can feel very safe. I also love some of those energies that come from what we might call Divine Mother, whatever sort of spiritual tradition, or just like what it means, to connect more into feminine energies, and that can be in nature. So I think all of that comes into, it's like tuning in at a different level than this level. So that's the magic that I love, I would say.
It's so interesting, and in that, Laura and I were trained in a very academic environment. Science ruled the day. There was no conversation about even psyche, let alone spirit. And the reason that we want you, Padma, with us is because, as Laura spoke about, we have both moved into this place in our lives. And I can only say for me, but certainly triggered by the perimenopause, menopause, physical reality and experience, and how my life pivoted during and after it. That really brought me to a place where I felt like I need to make sure that I'm looking at many aspects and ways of being in the world. And that even, allopathic medicine is a terrific tool. It informs us in so many ways. We are there during the retreat at Mama Farm to give the science, because we want people to not have misinformation, but information based on studies. but we also want them to look at the broader picture of who they are in their life, in the broader world, how they're integrating this science with the realities of their day to day. We like to talk about, oh, well, if we tell you that the only way to be healthy is to run a marathon every day and you have a cast on your leg, we're not helping you. We're not looking at you. We're not embracing who you are in your world, at least at the moment. And that's what Mama Farm does for us. It creates this container in which we create all of this incredible conversation that's based on science, but
Mm-hmm.
also, I don't know, kind of rides on this cloud of spirit and community and the beauty of the farm. That's just such a wonderful integration. And Padma, you haven't joined us yet, but one of the things that Laura and I do at the beginning of the retreat is talk about our own experiences with the menopause and why this time in women's lives feels so important to us. And what's great about our partnership is that we come from very different perspectives, and the way we look at our experiences, treatments is quite divergent in many ways. And that's, I think, our beauty. Because we're looking at
Mm.
the two sides, if you will, of the experience, and continually asking each other, like, what do you think about that? And how would you think about this? So yeah, and it's so funny, Laura, as you were describing the farm and the energy of the farm, I kept thinking of the queen bee, because there's honey being, harvested at the farm. And we were very fortunate to have Isabella with us last time at the retreat, and she talked about the bees and the queen bee, and it was just, yeah, it was just beautiful, just beautiful.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so I guess let's go into misinformation, and this is more for Laura, but I'd love Padma's kind of take on it too. So one of the things as I said in my intro, was there's a lot of information out there right now about the menopause and perimenopause. I mean, it's almost daunting. I mean, I'm the expert, so to speak, and yet I can't take it all in. It's just constant. And what we're learning more and more is that some of this information is just not true. It's not accurate. It's being generated by AI using images of doctors who haven't even consented to talk about something. So it's really wackadoodle out there. So, Laura, can you talk about misinformation and how the retreat is in contrast, if you will, to the bombardment of information we're getting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think probably the two most interesting things that are happening today, Amy, you touched on, is this, we are just at the beginning of a really frightening wave of sort of easy to create imposters on the internet, on all channels of the internet, that are promoting different ways of being healthy. The longevity space is huge. The wellness industry, millions and millions of dollars. And then there's you know, well-meaning physicians who aren't getting any advertising dollars or anything, who just have their own YouTube channel to try and educate their patients more broadly. It's a big voice. But then they get hijacked into some other actor selling some supplement. And of course, a lot of people I have debates with are like, well, the supplements aren't, if they're not going to hurt you, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm like, well, if you're spending money on something that isn't going to help you, that's harm, because that's money you could be spending on other things that could improve your life. So anyway, that the misinformation space, I think we are just in health and wellness and longevity and disease processes. We're just at the beginning of that getting so much worse. Even I find that just alarming, because I have patients and colleagues and family coming to me with, well, I read this, I saw this, and then I chase it down and realize, wow, that was all like down a rabbit hole of falsehoods. So I think it will drive people back towards a more traditional model of conversation, because we don't know where to go to get in the public sphere, to get reliable information. And as you said, Amy, that it's very hard to personalize that, because unlike many themes in medicine, I can't think of anything else where the concept one size fits all doesn't work. There's just individualized, or the groovy word is precision, where it's precise to you, that is required in this stage of life because it is how women experience the transition is so diverse, and what will help support them. There's so many things to choose from, and the tailoring is so critical. So having that in those conversations are going to have to be in the long form interactions with someone who's deeply knowledgeable and trustworthy in that space. And can I pick up on sort of where you left off, Amy, which is, I think, part of what was special during our prior two retreats is the movement to be comfortable with uncertainty. Because I think the frustration of doctors saying, I don't know, or there's no evidence for that, or, the science isn't there yet, when it's true that we are so painfully underfunded in all this research around women's health. I don't know if you two read this, but Melinda French Gates just started a huge women's health fund. And the quote from the article from her says, when I learned that 1% of pharmaceutical company research dollars goes to women's health, 1%, except cancer, women's cancers, yes. And that women live 10 years longer than men, but in worse health. So anyway, that's just two data points to show how far behind the science is for women. So being comfortable with where we don't know the answers to certain things, but where you and I, from steeping in this and swimming in all the data endlessly, and then personalizing it for ourselves, for people we love, and then for all of our patients, has allowed me to feel more comfortable where we don't know and have to sort of have a leap of faith about certain ways of being that will make you feel better and make you live with more vitality and maybe a little more playfulness and joyfulness. But that's a big jump for me because I was in such a rigid structure of if there isn't good evidence for an intervention, you can't recommend it. But now there's just there's no evidence for that yet, and there's probably no harm, and so let's go.
Yeah, it's being honest about all of this that's so important. And rather than just having a blanket statement, we don't know, what we do during the retreat is go beyond. And that's again why we invite someone like Padma into the circle, because perhaps what lies beyond is looking at someone's emotional, spiritual, psychic contour and how that weaves into the science we have. And moreover, what I wanted to touch on is we've all worked in hospitals and we all work in the medical system. That one of the things that also came up during the retreats and often in my office is women are describing such frustration with the medical system. So trying to help people navigate the system is part of what Laura and I try to do. And Padma can contribute because she works in a hospital. Yeah, it's this weaving that goes on during the weekend with what we know, what we don't know, kind of what our wishes and hopes are, and also the understanding. I think we say it quite often during the retreat is like, this is what's going on today. Tomorrow, it may shift. And that's why conversations, relationships, someone whom you can call and say, oh, my hot flushes have now shifted. They're not at night anymore. They're all day long. Or I'm really feeling blue in a way that I've never felt blue before. Or I'm feeling overwhelmed. Or oh, my bone density scan came back and it's telling me now I have the following. What do I do? So it's a journey. It's an ongoing one. And our hope is that we can provide resources, information that's depending upon where you are in the conversation. We're either jumping on board with you at the beginning, the middle, or as you move through the kind of the tendrils of it at the end, which just means the tendrils moving into just later in life, where we hope we provide information also about vitality and well-being. Padma, thoughts about all that?
Well, I definitely wanted to pick up on, as Laura was talking about this uncertainty. I think what's very interesting as I work with, different patients is that a lot of what we can get focused on is the information seeking. We want kind of answers, we want certainty, which is great. In fact, my wife and I were just talking about this morning, the information gathering that's so vital, and yet there's the digestion and the integration of all that. And in a way, in the world of kind of mindfulness, or even just spiritual well-being, which is not just religion, it's kind of our spirit, our meaning making, our authentic expression, so much more of well-being. And I know this as somebody who's gone through menopause, and in my 60s I have various inflammatory conditions that I have to balance. Is so much of my well-being depends on relating to my body, and whether or not, what I see in people I work with is they're often coming to me with a focus on fixing the body. And I work with people who have terminal illness as well. And what I'm kind of orienting is like, what about loving your body? What about starting to come back to a relationship to your body that's caring for your body and understanding and listening, and not in a way to fix it all the time, but understanding that there are parts of disease that we can't fix, but we can change the way we experience and relate to. And that's foundational in mindfulness. I think people think of mindfulness as like being zenned out or being able to be very calm. A lot of it is about recognizing the relationship we have to our experience. What are we telling ourselves about experience? So, again, a lot of just how I work in group or individually is about like listening to the stories you're telling yourself. And, can you shift that? Can you come into a kind of kinder, more sensitive way of being in relationship?
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Mhm.
Do either of you have anything else that you want to add to what people might want to know about the retreat? And just a reminder, it's at Mama Farm in Bellport, Long Island, November 7th through 9th. And if you want more information, you go to mamafarm.us or MAMAFARM.us. You can always reach out to me as well, and I could send you there. But what else do you think folks should know about this opportunity and what we can offer them?
Mhm. Well, I think one of the most important parts is that in the title, the art of pausing is the gift to give oneself, to just extract yourself from your life, from your phone, from your computer, family, all the responsibilities that are often really unbelievably heavy at the 45 to 60 range, where elderly parents, children launching, careers, marriages, whatever, it's a lot, is to pull yourself out of that, to pause and turn the focus inward, because so our energy is going out, and you're sort of really on your stride at that part of your life. Personally, I was going so fast, the train was moving so fast that I wouldn't have been able to answer a single question of like, are you having menopausal symptoms? I'd be like, I'm too busy to notice. I'm just trying to get through each day with so much responsibility. And then, the gift in a way of having my sister get sick with cancer and having to step off the train 3 years ago, or four almost, and then, hold her hand through a terminal illness and then dying, is really the only thing that sort of helped me get off that train that was careening at 100 miles an hour. And that was a huge pause. And then that pause then gave me this opportunity to shift my, energetic focus and relationship to self, and actually that ended up, improving relationship to others in immeasurable ways. And so that this opportunity is a mini version of that, of like stepping off your train, even if it's a good train, but it might need a pause, and that pause is all to look at self and integration of self, not like, my sexuality is good, but my marriage is okay, but my body feels like crap. It's just that pause allows maybe a little bit of dissecting, but then integrating. And that's why we are so excited that we can work with Padma on those layers to this whole experience of changing your relationship to yourself and caring for self in a much broader and more spiritual way.
Mm. And in addition, on the farm, you're fed unbelievably delicious food,
Yeah.
snacks, and just walking outside the building where we hold the retreat, again, is this gorgeous farm through which you can take walks and take moments for yourself. And there's a cute little library in the building. And it's just a lovely place to, yes, take a pause, relax, learn, eat well.
Food is incredible. Almost all local farm to table, local farmers, because that little segment of Long Island still has a lot of small family farms.
Okay.
So yeah, the food was divine,
Yeah.
and the environment is. And then I think the other important part that Amy and I have to challenge each other on is that, given that we've always been in these very intense medical spaces and educational activities, is that we sometimes feel like we're giving a fire hose of information and have to say to each other, I have to say, like, that's too much. And she says to me, that's too much. You're trying to give like a 1 week, educational full on menopause in 2.5 days. So we have to curate really carefully what's like really the juicy part of each of the topics that's super important, like sleep and bone and cardiovascular health, but then make those short enough so we can get into some of the things that are the hardest to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Padma, anything else you'd like to just say to the listeners so that they might better know you or what you could bring to the retreat this year?
Well, partly in a way, I just want to say, I've been going on retreats since I was in my 20s. I was very blessed to come across Buddhism when I was 22, and actually starting with women's retreats, because that just happened to be how the tradition was set up. So most of my retreat spaces have been with women, and it's just magical. It's even at the hospital when I do mindfulness courses for patients, which is feels a lot more clinical, and there's just a magic. There's really, what I think, and I'm only just getting to know Amy and Laura, but I also feel like you're just so much in this beautiful evolution in medicine that I hope is going to start growing, of like, going beyond this very kind of, scientific only, into something that is just much more whole person oriented. In a way, goes back to the roots of medicine, which was actually connected to spirit.
Mhm.
So I'm excited. And I'm also excited to learn more about menopause. And I just know that this kind of container, and I can promise you that been doing this for a long time. So I'm very good at creating containers where people can just go deeper. So I think the balance of those two things is going to be pretty magical. And yeah, I'm excited.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you for everything. I'm so excited.
I know, me too. I
So,
mean, I want one last thing I think we can't forget is that the science and the recommendations are changing literally like by the week. And that can be, even for the most informed OB-GYN who's trying to keep up to date on midlife care while she's also, doing obstetrics or, cancer screening and all of that. It's impossible because it was neglected for so long. And now there's like this little, the catch up of people studying and publishing and then putting together the good research and then saying, well, here's what we know and here's what we don't know. But this kind of makes sense in the don't know area. Like, it's just changing so fast. So that's why Amy and I thought we had to give these retreats, is that things are changing too quickly to have the routine doctor space be able to take care of women during this time. It's just impossible with things changing so quickly.
Yeah. The other thing I want to add is what's so great about this small group setting is that you might come with a set of questions and someone comes with a different set of questions. And so we learn from one another through these questions, through our, again, individual experiences. So it's just very robust and fulfilling. So please, everyone out there listening, if you are interested or you know someone who might be interested, please go to mamafarm.us. Mama Farm is also on Instagram. You could write to GynoCurious.com. And please consider taking time for yourself, taking a pause in your life to learn, be embraced by community, learn from the three of us what we have to share, and you're going to teach us as well. That's what's so exciting about this small group setting, is it's such a wonderful exchange. So please consider joining us. Thank you, Laura and Padma. I'm so looking forward to our time together.
Thank you, Amy. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
And thank you to those who are listening. I'm so grateful for you tuning into GynoCurious. Please stay well and please listen to your instincts and intuition. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored.